You know, one of the fun things about going through the book of Luke verse by verse is it does seem like it repeats itself a lot. In fact, scripture would be a whole lot less if God didn't have to tell us the same thing over and over and over because, well, that's our nature. I think sometimes we've got to hear things over and over before we finally go, yeah, that's right. And the same kind of goes for this section. Honestly, I can sum up this entire section of scripture in one phrase, and it's simply love is an action. Love is an action that, frankly, you know as well as I do, talk is cheap. We can talk about it all we want. There's a old friend of mine. He was bound to a wheelchair. He had multiple sclerosis and really good dude, loved the Lord. And he used to tell me, Jason, don't talk about it, be about it. Don't talk about it, be about it. And so that's a phrase that I certainly have taught my sons. They know, don't talk about it, be about it. And that's really what this whole section is about. If you saw last week about Chuck, man, make sure you go back. He talked about verse 634 and just this kind of big idea of lending and what Jesus did for us, and we need to do that for others. And so this week we're going to start out in 635, and I'm going to start out by saying I like big butts, and I cannot lie. And I love big butts in Scripture. That's what we come to in 635. It says but. It starts out with but. Whenever you see a but, circle it, highlight it. That's a big deal. But love your enemies. And how do you do that? By doing good and lending. Expect nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High. So it starts out, love your enemies. Again, we're in the same section. Love your enemies. Love your enemies. I think in Romans it says, love your enemies. By doing so, you're heaping burning coals on their head. You know, the same message is over and over and over. Love your enemies. Jesus from the cross prayed, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus, even in his dying moments, loved his enemies. And how do you love your enemies? By doing good. By doing good. And it says by lending and expect nothing in return. And so, I think there's something to that in how we invest what we have to offer. Our time, our talent, and our treasures. Our time, our talent, our treasures. Like that's what we have to give for people. We can give of our time. We can give of our talents. And then, of course, like it's talking about here, we can give of our treasures. You can give of our treasures. And that's where I want to get to today is how are we investing in our enemies? How are we investing in those to come to know Jesus in word and truth? I think the old saying of put your money where your mouth is really comes to pass. How are you giving to help others hear the goodness of God? How are you giving to help others come to know Jesus and love Jesus? Again, love is an action. Love is an action. And so I can tell that people that I want them to come to know Jesus, but how am I showing that by my actions? And does my checkbook reflect that? I had a really hard conversation with a friend of mine, and he pretty much told me, Jason, I can tell where your priorities are by where you spend your time, your talent, and your treasures. If I look at your bank statement, that'll tell me what your priorities are. And that stung. That stung. But it was true. That's why it stung. Because when you look at my checking account, you can tell where my priorities are. Now, obviously that's a little change now because God has changed my heart. And really that's what this comes down to is loving your enemies through action. And that might be giving to organizations, wherever your heart is, whatever that passionate about, giving to organizations so that others would come to know Jesus. Maybe that's serving. Maybe that's serving people. Maybe there's who in your life that really you don't like. How can you serve them? Do good, time, talent, and treasures. This is how Jesus ends the verse, and it's incredibly powerful. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. For he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Man, God is patient. God is so patient. God is so patient with me, even when I didn't know him, when I was far from him, and I was defaming him, and I was disrespectful to him, and I was blaspheming him. He was so kind to me, and he was so generous to me, even when I was ungrateful. That's the God we serve. And so I don't know what that looks like for you today. And who's your enemy? Who are you struggling with? Where's God asking you to invest your time, talent, and treasures? Because what I do know to be true is this: love is an action. Don't just talk about it, be about it. And so wherever that looks like for you today, I don't know what your life and situation is, but what I do know is this: that God ain't gonna fail you, man. Love those around you. Even those that are hard to love them anyway. Love them to Jesus. Anyway, y'all, hope you guys have a great Wednesday. We'll see you back next week.